Good afternoon, folks. It's 2:03. We'll go ahead and get started. Again, thank you for joining us today for our workshop for Land Use and Natural Climate Solutions Working Group. We really appreciate you joining us this afternoon. We look forward to a productive conversation. Please, if we can, we're asking folks to place their name, put their name in the chat with the organization they may be representing. And again, you may be seeing some folks who are asking for those who were able to jump on a little bit earlier. We're asking for them to share the favorite place to hike, bike, walk, or bird watch in our region, as we thought that'd be a fun things to share. But it is 2:04. Wanted to be mindful of folks' time. We do. Let's go ahead and get started. My name is Michael De La Rosa, and I'll be opening up our workshop today, and then we'll be handing it off to our project team, who will carry you through a productive conversation discussion today. Thank you again for joining us this afternoon for the Land Use and Natural Climate Solutions Working Group. I do want to make a quick note that the meeting today is being recorded. Before we get into welcome remarks, I do want to say that we will be providing a language translation for today's meeting. Now I'd like to introduce you to our interpreter, Giovanna, who's joining us today. She's going to be explaining our Spanish and English language features that we have available for the workshop today. Giovanna, can you please come off mute and tell everyone about these features?
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Giovanna Wormsbecker, and I'll be your Spanish interpreter during this meeting. In order to provide language access, this meeting will have simultaneous interpretation from English to Spanish. Please know that the translation globe will not appear until after I've read through all language instructions. Therefore, we're asking that everyone joining us for this event, please select your preferred language to facilitate hearing presenters and participants clearly. If you're on a laptop or a desktop, you will see a globe at the bottom right of your screen. Please click on the globe icon that says interpretation and then select English. If you're on an iPad or your phone or a similar device, then locate the three-dot menu on the right corner of your screen, click on language interpretation, and then select English. When it's your turn to speak, please remember to be loud and clear and speak at a moderate pace, as the interpreter will be interpreting simultaneously into the other language. Buenas tardes a todos, me llamo Giovanna Wormsbecker y yo voy a ser su intérprete en español durante esta reunión. Esta reunión contará con interpretación simultánea bidireccional del inglés al español. El globo de traducción no va a aparecer hasta que se hayan leído todas las instrucciones en los dos idiomas. Por lo tanto, pedimos a los presentes que seleccionen su idioma preferido para facilitar escuchar a los presentadores y participantes con claridad. Si está utilizando una computadora, verá un icono en la parte inferior de su pantalla a la derecha en forma de globo que dice Interpretación. Haga clic ahí y seleccione Español. Si está utilizando un iPad o teléfono, localice el menú de 3 puntos que aparece a la derecha de su pantalla, haga clic en Interpretación de idiomas y elija Español. Cuando sea su turno de hablar, por favor recuerde hablar en voz fuerte y clara y a un paso moderado, ya que el intérprete estará interpretando simultáneamente al otro idioma. Gracias. Thank you.
Oh, that's inevitable. That happens. I was muted. Thanks all. Thank you, Giovanna. I appreciate that. Let's go ahead and have the translation team initiate the language channels and get started. So thank you. We will be using a variety of methods to hear from you today. You will have the same features whether you're joining us from your computer or your cell phone. Please type in your thoughts using the chat feature. This is located at the bottom of your screen. If you're joining us by cell today, select the three dots at the lower right of your screen. If you would like to speak over the audio, please use the raise your hand option, also located at the bottom of your screen. If you are calling in, for those who are calling in, please enter *9. We will be using these two features in addition to a virtual whiteboard today. Additionally, we will pause in between our speakers to ask you questions and hear your thoughts. The majority of our time will be focused on hearing your comments and answering your questions the best that we can. Here are those same Zoom features, but for a mobile phone view, for anyone who may be joining from a mobile phone device through the Zoom app. If you select More at the bottom of the taskbar in the Zoom, you will see the options to chat. Select your language of choice and raise your hand to indicate you would like to speak. So again, my name is Michael De La Rosa, and I'm part of the project team that the County of San Diego Land Use and Environment Group has formed to help move forward and develop the regional decarbonization framework. Today, you will hear from Murtaza Baksamusa, our program manager for regional sustainability from the Land Use and Environment Group Executive Office, and Scott Anders, who is the director of the Energy Policy Initiative Center at the University of San Diego. I'd like to take just a few minutes to set the stage on how these working groups will be structured, where we are today with the framework, and how you will be able to continue shape the implementation playbook. We have set up 5 special topic working groups to focus on key emitting sectors and solutions for addressing our changing climate. These will categorize and guide the development of the implementation playbook, with a draft ready by the end of the year. Today, as we are working through the land use and natural climate solution sector, we would like to hear specific actions that can be included in the implementation playbook, such as specific plans, policies, or activities. Murtaza will give you more context into what we are looking for in a little bit. While we work through these special topic working groups, we will be utilizing our engagement portal to facilitate these groups. Everyone should have received instructions on registering to the portal. If you haven't yet, we ask that you please do so by going on the engagement portal link. We are sending the link in the chat now. This engagement portal will be the central area where all the workshop materials, documents, and notes will be uploaded for your convenience. If you can also see our meeting agendas there, as well as have this space to share ideas and ask questions. The RDF team will be monitoring the site and updating it within 48 hours of each meeting. Please do note, you only have access to the workshops groups that you have previously shown interest in from the interest form that was sent to you. If you do not have access, or if you would like access to be part of other special topic working groups, please feel free to email the team at zerocarbon@sdcounty.ca.gov. For today's agenda, Murtaza will be giving you all a quick recap of what the implementation playbook is and how you will help shape it. Then Scott will be sharing some additional context on regional emissions. Then we will dive into 2 topics: preserve carbon stock and carbon removal and storage. Here is where we would like to open up the bulk of this discussion, hearing from you and your ideas. We have Rebecca from our RDF team, who will be sharing her screen as we continue our discussion, and she will be taking notes. Please remember to speak clearly and slowly so that Rebecca can be sure to capture everyone's ideas. As we reach the end, we will be opening the discussion up for any topics that we may not have discussed as part of the presentation, and then we will proceed to close. Again, I just real quick want to thank you for joining us this afternoon. And please, if you could, for those who are joining us late, if you could put your name and organizations in your chat. And with that, I will turn the presentation over to Murtaza to give us a quick background on the regional decarbonization framework. Murtaza?
Thank you, Michael. Hello, everybody. My name is Murtaza Baksamusa. I'm the program manager for regional sustainability. And I just want to take 2 minutes of your time to give a brief overview of the integrated regional decarbonization framework. So we're taking an integrated approach to the framework, from study to action, because study is not sufficient to getting it done. First, the technical report by UC San Diego and University of San Diego, which was the first study of its kind that scientifically established the strategies to eliminate regional emissions of heat trapping gases. The study analyzed that over half of the emissions across the region in 2035 and beyond would still remain unaddressed, even if every local government implemented their respective climate action plans. Second, a workforce development study by Inclusive Economics that would ensure that we have high quality green jobs. It explored the way in which actions to lower pollution from the region's industries can do so in ways that support workers. Both this and the technical report are complete, posted on our website, and available in all county public libraries. And third, an implementation playbook, which we are now beginning. We had previously referred to this as an implementation pathways report, and we will provide more context as we go into this presentation. So our organizing framework for individual and collective actions for getting to zero carbon emissions is this playbook. We are starting with best practices by learning from measures that local governments have already adopted in climate action plans by each topic. However, this is a playbook, not a plan. It does not have the enforceable mandates and milestones. It will be a menu of options with a plug-and-play strategies organized by 5 topics we discussed. and it will be an accessible resource for all players in the public and private sectors to design, finance, and implement decarbonization projects, programs, and policies. With the support of the University of San Diego's Energy Policy Initiatives Center, the implementation playbook presented to our board in spring of next year will provide guidance on 3 levels. First, it will draw out actions that each organization, business, and government can do on their own. Second, building up on those actions, we will explore community-wide actions for local and tribal governments. And third, emissions know no boundaries. So we will identify actions from a regional perspective where we can gain efficiencies and greater outcomes for more collective impact. Today, we are in the working group for the land use and natural climate solutions. We are looking for your ideas on actionable policies, programs, projects that can help us in designing this implementation playbook together. Through all the topics, there are 3 common themes that we want your feedback on specific actions that can be taken at all scales, from an organizational operation perspective, a business perspective, a government perspective, individual perspective, and then we add it all together, what can we do at a regional perspective? First, what works and does not work based on your experience? Second question is, what are the impacts on underserved communities, positive or negative? And third question that we will be repeating throughout this session is, what is it that we are missing? What are the types of activities that are out there that could include things like data collection and analysis, including research and development, implementation plans, financial incentives, policies, workforce training, education and outreach, as well as activities to implement actions and monitor progress. These questions are here to guide the conversation as we look forward to actions that we can include. We need your ideas of what is already out there. And with that, I will hand it over to Scott to go over some of the topics that we want to focus on for the initial part of this discussion.
Thank you, Murtaza. Thank you, Murtaza, and thanks everyone for joining us today. So I want to provide just a brief overview of the topics for our discussion, provide some context and background, but really we want to get into the discussion and hear from you. So in terms of regional emissions, we have been presenting these to all of the working groups just again to provide some background and context as to the level of emissions that we're addressing today. So on-road transportation, electricity and natural gas account for about 80% of emissions, and on-road transportation, which comprises basically cars and trucks, makes up almost 50% of regional emissions. So that's one of the bigger emissions categories. Next slide. Here you can see some of the other sectors that make up the other sources of emissions, from industrial gases to solid waste. And then there are several smaller categories which are 1% or less of total emissions. So for the purposes of discussion, and this is also kind of how we organized some of the work we EPIC did in chapter 8 of the technical report. Find it helpful to kind of break up topics into smaller chunks, particularly for discussion purposes here today. So we've broken up the broader decarbonization pathway of land use and natural climate solutions into 2. 1, preserving existing carbon stocks, and then 2, increasing natural carbon removal and storage. And so basically, these are the 2 ways that we can impact greenhouse gas emissions in this particular pathway. And so just to kind of define terms here, preserving carbon stocks, what we mean by that is preventing carbon that's already stored in trees, plants, and soils from entering the atmosphere. So basically, we're trying not to increase emissions here. We want to make sure that the carbon that's stored remains stored, or seeking to do that. And just a simple example here is open space easements, where we're preserving land that hopefully won't be disturbed and can sit there as a carbon stock or sink. And then the second category is increasing the natural system's ability to remove and store carbon. So the idea here is that we're trying to, in the first one, we were trying to prevent release of carbon. In the second category here, we're actually trying to physically remove carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. So we're trying to remove it and store it as permanently as possible. That's a bigger goal. But for this particular pathway, it's about removing carbon in natural systems. So examples are urban tree planting or some sort of habitat restoration or enhancement that would lead to additional removal of carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and then stored in those natural systems. So we're first going to talk about preserving carbon stocks. And just to kind of provide some high-level background, these are some legislative and other activities happening in the state of California. And so SB 27 was recently codified or recently passed, and it codifies the Natural and Working Lands Climate Smart Strategy. It also requires a carbon removal target that includes natural and working lands. And it also asks the California Natural Resources Agency to develop a registry for greenhouse gas reduction and removal projects on natural and working lands. I mentioned previously the Natural and Working Lands Climate Smart Strategy that was released previously, and it seeks to reduce carbon emissions from natural and working lands, increase carbon storage, and preserve, conserve, and restore natural habitats. And I'm sure folks are familiar with the executive order to conserve 30% of land and coastal waterways by 2030, the so-called 30 by 30 initiative. So these are just some examples of what the state of California is doing to preserve carbon stocks. And just a couple other kind of key considerations, sort of backdrops for this conversation, is that there's carbon value in existing natural lands in and of themselves. Even if you don't do anything, an acre of chaparral or an acre of forest that just has a carbon value. And the carbon value is that it's providing the service of storing the carbon. Should that be disturbed in some way, that would become an emission. Statewide, natural and working lands are a net emitter. So this is something that was discussed in the most recent draft scoping plan. We also know that fire and drought are significant threats to our existing carbon stocks in California. And very specifically in San Diego, we have many landowners in the region. Federal government, so we have national forests, we have militaries, we have tribes, et cetera. So we have a lot of landowners to think about as we're thinking about where could we conserve and preserve existing carbon stocks. So just a couple examples to kind of get the discussion flowing. Murtaza mentioned the 3 scales of implementation: the organization scale, the community, and the regional scale. These are just a couple examples that we have from previous work we've done with climate action planning, among other things. And these are examples of the kind of things we're looking to collect today. As Murtaza mentioned, the playbook is kind of a menu of options. And so to make it as complete and comprehensive as possible, we'd love your input so that we can have as comprehensive a list as possible. So on the organizational scale, an example would be developing a tree management program to reduce tree mortality. At the community scale, we've seen cities conducting community-wide analysis of land that could be conserved and developing programs to acquire open space and conserve land, like agricultural land preservation programs. At the regional scale, we could conduct a similar analysis, but at a much broader scale, and then create partnerships across nonprofits, agencies, local governments to identify and pursue funding that we could use to acquire and manage those kinds of preserved lands. So again, just a couple examples, lots of other ways to do this, lots of other examples. One thing I didn't mention in my brief presentation here is blue carbon, and maybe we'll talk about that in the second half. But anyway, just a high-level backdrop to get us started. And with that, I'll turn it back to Murtaza.
Thank you, Scott. I just want to thank you for that overview of land use and natural climate solutions. For some of you that in terms of the topics that we're covering today, I just wanted to give a little bit of like an editorial perspective here that we, in order to manage the two categories, food systems and circular economy, and this one, land use and natural climate solutions, we moved over some of the agriculture related questions and components into the other category, and we'll take feedback today as well. However, we're going to organize it within that particular category as we kind of move forward and populate some of the actions. So with that, once again, thank you for the overview of carbon stocks. And as Rebecca puts up the mural, I want you all to think of this topic: what actions can governments, businesses, and individuals do to preserve existing carbon stocks? Once again, we're trying to use this particular tool to capture what comments and feedback we have on this particular topic. However, we do have like a bike rack on the site, so there might be other topics that are not discussed today that we'll be capturing in that one. So these are the two topics that Scott presented, the yellow and the green. So Rebecca will be organizing the feedback we receive in these particular categories. So I just wanted to give you a big picture perspective of what we're going to do today. And this tool will help us organize the report and follow up with you as well. In order to get the feedback in an orderly fashion, I would prefer if you can use the chat function or raise hands, so then I can call on you to come over the audio on the raise hand function, or if you prefer, just provide your comments in the chat function and I will read it out, and I'll also ask for a response from our team. Whilst we're waiting off for a minute, and I'll just wait a minute to for folks to decide to come on the audio. I want to start off with the question about what is natural and working land, and I want Elise from our team, who's the author of the chapter, to some of the questions that are coming in people's minds about natural lands and working lands, and what is that thing. And if Elise can come on the audio and kind of give us a little bit of an explainer, appreciate it.
Sure. Yeah, as a quick overview, natural and working lands is a very broad category that encompasses all lands that aren't settled or developed or otherwise urbanized. And so natural lands broadly refer to any lands that are in a wild or semi-wild state. These could include things like preserves or protected lands, restored lands, wild lands. And then working lands include any and all agricultural lands, such as farmlands, croplands, rangelands, grasslands, vineyards, orchards, all of that. And yes, as has been noted in the chat, there are numerous natural climate solutions associated with working lands, and those can become important carbon sinks and can contribute to significant carbon sequestration.
Thank you, Elise. I'll just quickly go over some of the comments in the chat, and then I'll ask John to come on the audio. So Craig Jones says that preserve carbon stock means no land use sprawl. Cody Harrison says that our approach rules out any of the natural climate solutions that don't have a greenhouse gas impact. I'll come back to that discussion again, because some of the natural climate solutions or approaches are not just about decarbonization. Anthony Mint says that compost applications on crop and rangelands and riparian restoration of eligible areas could deliver greenhouse gas reduction of a significant amount. Mary Valderrama says, please consider banning petroleum-based pesticides and carbon taxing animal-based products, food, clothing, etc. Craig Jones says, working lands, I think Elise covered that. Cody Harrison would suggest that to engage in systematic ecosystem accounting and internalizing these positive externalities into the county's financial statements, thus creating a financial incentive to grow the capacity of the ecosystem systems provided, services provided. And there's an ordinance that he has shared with us. Thank you, Cody. I will now go to the audio and go ahead, John.
Yeah, thank you so much. I wanted to touch on, you're talking about the natural solutions of the lands, and I think a big part of that needs to be transitioning away from synthetic pesticides and fertilizers for a number of reasons. And that goes from, the cities and counties' use on their lands, but agriculture as well. And the county and cities can work on incentives, right, to help homeowners, landscape companies, and farmers. But the big thing is that not only are these pesticides and fertilizers, they're synthetic. They come from fossil fuels. So right out of the gate, using tons and tons and tons of pesticides, it continues our dependence upon fossil fuels, which we know, the drilling for it, we all know is very bad for the climate. But the pesticides are also highly damaging to the soil and all the microbes in the soil that make healthy soils, which basically removes their ability to store carbon, particularly large amounts, which we all know they can. There's also, PFAs are a common surfactant, a common add-in to pesticides. So not only are we, killing our soil by using pesticides, but, we're causing red tides and that type of thing, but we're also, dumping PFAs into our water system, which destroys biodiversity and that type of thing. So quickly transitioning away from pesticides, checks a lot of boxes from a natural land standpoint. Not only is it good for the climate, but it's also very good for biodiversity, which is also good for the climate. So that's something I think needs to be a very top priority for the county in this framework.
Thank you very much, Joe. Next, we'll call on Joel. Joel, you're next.
Hello, this is Joel Kramer at the Resource Conservation District. I just want to speak on behalf of the agricultural producers that we serve, including farmers and ranchers. Firstly, I want to celebrate the county is embracing the carbon farming pilot program. I think that's really important as an active way of sequestering carbon on our lands, which are extensive, our working lands. And to that point, and to what Anthony's been saying, I think an effective way of doing that is taking advantage of the huge amount of compost that's becoming available and helping producers get it efficiently on the ground. We have really rough, steep terrain here, and the quicker and more easily we can get it on the ground, the better we'll be able to take advantage of it. So equipment support is really critical. But I'd also like to push to another level because of the existing sink of orchards. We have an amazing production. We're the top avocado producer in the country, and we have many other subtropical and other Mediterranean orchards, and we're going to lose it because of drought, because of rising water prices. And so a lot of farmers are turning those orchards into firewood and suburban development, which creates more emissions. And so subsidizing producers to switch over to drought tolerant crops may not sequester more carbon, but it will help us to retain our existing carbon sink. And that is already in place up in Riverside and Temecula with the crop swap program. So I'd be happy to tell you more about it, but I really encourage the support of a crop swap program to keep that orchard sink. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It was, I think, Joel, you were referring to the August 31st board approval of the pilot carbon farming pilot. So I just, for the benefit of anybody else, if you want, feel free to come on the audio and explain carbon farming. Even though I said agriculture was, we already discussed this, we can discuss it again in terms of what is carbon farming. Right. If you want, you can come on the audio, Joel, and explain carbon farming?
Sure. Thanks, Marisha. Yeah, I think a couple other people have referred to it. It's a variety of practices, also referred to as regenerative agriculture. And the basic concept is to just not disturb the soil so that it sequesters carbon rather than releases it. And there's many benefits, including more resilience to climate, which is really beneficial to agricultural producers as the conditions get more difficult. But it includes such practices as composting, mulching, prescribed grazing, native hedgerows, and other practices which build soil health while increasing the amount of carbon in the soil and therefore its ability to retain precious water. Hope that helps.
That was very helpful. Thank you so much, Joel. I knew that this was gonna be like an easy question for you. So so you asking me, I'm asking you. All right. Next, I want to call on Madison. If you're, I think John, your hand is still up. I guess it's a legacy hand. So I'll go to Madison.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for the invite. Madison Coleman, policy advocate with Climate Action Campaign. I just wanted to reiterate and echo what a few people have said in the chat. So I think, the RDF technical report is pretty clear in stating that the most effective and inexpensive natural climate solution needed to achieve a zero carbon future is to avoid developing natural and working lands that sequester and store carbon. And so I think in order to save these carbon sinks, we recommend that the county, first of all, stop permitting sprawl development in high VMT, high fire hazard zones. Sprawl is inequitable and autocentric and is one of the greatest sources of emissions in our region. And so, it can destroy natural habitats and green spaces and brings greater wildfire and public health risks to neighborhoods and adjacent natural lands. And so in order to combat this, we recommend that the county align the RDF with SANDAG's sustainable community strategies and SANDAG's mobility hubs to ensure that families are living in affordable housing near transportation and sustaining jobs in green open spaces. And then as far as it relates to trees, a couple of things I would recommend that the RDF consider committing to a green infrastructure plan that promotes green streets, clean water, and stormwater capture. And that can be coupled with a commitment to possibly adopting a green street ordinance. And also, I think this is really important that the RDF include a tree canopy coverage and a specific percentage of that tree canopy coverage be prioritized to environmental justice communities first, who have experienced historical disinvestments in their communities. Thanks.
Thank you, Madison. That was a lot to digest here. There are several points, and Rebecca's trying to catch up. I want to make sure we have all of them. The sustainable community strategy, tree canopy EJ, with focus on EJ communities. So on that, I want to kind of see if Elise can come back on for a second, because this discussion, when we have gone presented to several city councils, it has come up, especially say last time I presented to National City. The city council was interested in this, what is regional tree equity assessment, and how would we kind of address the question of equity. And part of that kind of discussion here, and it goes to some of the questions in the chat too, it's not just about carbon itself or greenhouse gas emissions itself, but also some of the benefits in, for example, mitigating urban heat island effect, especially, or providing shade in places that could get extremely hot, and there's no, especially say pedestrians, transit stops, places that need shade. So some of these, especially in high dense areas, some of the benefits of trees go beyond carbon. Nonetheless, this is a carbon decarbonization discussion, and I want to bring it to that. To bring in that question is, do urban trees really help in the context of decarbonization, or to what extent are urban trees a factor in decarbonization? Elise, do you want to come on the audio?
Sure. Rick, so you really covered a lot of the co-benefits associated with urban trees and urban greening. We are a chaparral and coastal sage scrub dominated region. So oftentimes, planting things other than trees is really helpful. I saw a note in the chat about other California natives, native plants, and I think there is a lot of opportunity for urban greening with plants beyond just trees. But as a general rule of thumb, urban greening is basically the only natural climate solution available for urban areas, because those areas have replaced natural and working lands. So planting trees and shrubs and other plants is one of the only ways to naturally sequester carbon in those areas, short of full restoration. So urban trees, urban greening do certainly have natural climate solution benefits of sequestration, and they have numerous co-benefits, many of which can provide things like aesthetic benefits to neighborhoods, improved air quality, improved habitat for wildlife, and the list kind of goes on and on. But choosing those trees carefully and choosing the right locations for them in urban settings is very important as well.
Thank you very much, Elise, our in-house biologist, for the answer. I'm gonna try to, for the sake of time, there's two Marys in queue, Mary Lysigang and Mary Matawa, and then we're gonna pause that and move on to the next topic. We will have the open discussion at the end of this, so there will be opportunity for more comments, questions. So Mary Lysigang, go ahead.
Yeah, I think one thing that's really missing in a lot of our decarbonization framework is the importance of blue carbon ecosystems like coastal wetlands that sequester and store up to 10 times more than terrestrial forests do in terms of carbon, and only 10% of California's historic wetlands remain. These also protect against sea level rise, storm surges and flooding, increase water quality, and increase biodiversity. And so they're a huge asset, but there's very little research and very little restoration and funding going into that. In fact, the county's climate action plan doesn't even mention coastal wetlands. And so I think bringing them into the conversation is incredibly important, and potentially increasing research funding so that we're able to understand how much carbon they really are storing.
Thank you, Mary. Really appreciate that. I was gonna keep that for the next topic, which is but I think it could go in either of these, both in sequestration as well as in the stock itself. So in terms of stock itself, I want to prep a little bit, ask Elise, because this has been kind of our passion in many cases when we are presenting, is how do we get this discussion of blue carbon into the decarbonization discussion in terms of study to get it funded, just like you said, Mary. And given that San Diego is such an important, plays such an important role in blue carbon habitat, I want to bring Elise back on. And I know we're going a little bit over time, but I think we're kind of getting into the next topic too. So Elise, if you can explain what are blue carbon habitats?
Yeah, so blue carbon habitats are kind of broadly defined as any habitat that is partially, tidally, fully submerged or seasonally submerged in fresh or salt water. So for the San Diego region, those habitats tend to be marshes, wetlands, mudflats, salt pans and salt flats, and then seagrass or eelgrass beds. And we didn't include kelp and kelp forests because they are in state and federal waters. So no one in kind of the San Diego region has the jurisdictional authority to manage kelp forests, but we recognize that those are very important blue carbon habitats. So there is a chapter in the technical report in the Natural Climate Solutions chapter about blue carbon. And as noted, they are incredibly important carbon storage systems, and they hold an immense amount of carbon, and we don't have a good idea of how much they hold. But we do know that sea level rise will inevitably change these systems, and so there are management practices that can be planned for and thought through and potentially done at a regional scale to help restore and manage those wetlands and manage things like potentially wetland migration and allowing those wetlands to move and change with sea level rise. So thank you for bringing that up. I love blue carbon to talk about it all day.
So thank you, Mary. Very briefly, Mary Manova, do you want to come on the audio?
Well, first of all, I'd like to thank Mary L for bringing up blue carbon, because that was puzzling to me why we weren't hearing more of that. But the point I wanted to make was on things like crop swap. I think that that's really important, but I'd prefer not to think of it as a subsidy for farmers. That if farming is providing this benefit to the community, is something that the community should be, especially as important as this, should be interested in paying for, like any other commodity or service. So I'm always a little bit afraid when we talk about subsidies that people think that it's a gift rather than something of value. So thank you.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. We noted. I will, before I transition over to the next topic, I just want to, it reminds me of acknowledging some of the public agencies that are there today. And I'll start with Kelly Finn from the Navy, who has been here. Thank you so much for every single workshop. Today we have NCTD, Lillian Duharty and Mary Balderrama. Of course, Rimga from Wisconsin, from Solana Beach, also there for every single workshop. Standag has Yushi Chen today. U.S. Fish and Wildlife has Eric Porter. And then some of our colleagues from the county, particularly Agriculture Waste and Measures. We have John McKee, Monica Winters, Austin Shepard. I think from recycling, we have Caitlin Lellos. And from planning, Denise Wu. There might be others that I've missed. Please message me, let me know, and we'll acknowledge you. So as we move on, thank you, Rebecca, for the mural. Now we will transition back to the presentation. You heard about carbon stocks. We will move to carbon flow and storage.
Thanks, Murtaza. Yeah, great discussion. And for sure, there's a lot of overlap between these two categories. But just for purposes of kind of focusing the discussion, that's why we're kind of breaking them up. So now we're going to talk about the other piece of this, which is trying to remove more carbon from the atmosphere using natural systems. And just a couple state highlights here. The draft scoping plan calls for more carbon capture and storage and carbon dioxide removal, including from natural and working lands. Senate Bill 905, which was just signed into law, directs CARB, the California Air Resources Board, to create a carbon capture, removal, utilization, and storage program. One of the things that the bill directed CARB to do is to create regulations and a statewide permitting system. And then I think we talked about SB 27 in the last section, so maybe in the interest of time, we'll skip over that. Next slide. So some key considerations similar to what we did before. Excuse me. So in this case, so in the previous discussion, preserving habitat, and I'm not suggesting you don't have to do anything, right? But preserving habitat is basically not disturbing the habitat, right? In this case, we're actually seeking to enhance or expand the natural system. So, for example, planting more trees, ideally native or appropriate trees that are non-invasive and drought tolerant. In the previous commenter talked about wetlands, so restoring wetlands and other disturbed or marginalized or invaded lands. So basically, it's not just leaving the land alone, it's doing something to restore the capacity to remove and store carbon. And looking at our region, there are relatively few opportunities for reforestation. We just don't have as much forest as other parts of the state have. There are water implications for trees. And of course, we are facing a changing climate, which means drought, fire, invasive insects, which are all threats to those sorts of, for tree planting in particular. And we discussed, it was brought up earlier, but it's definitely worth continuing the discussion around blue carbon and the kinds of solutions that can be, the kinds of removal and storage opportunities that we can see there as well. So just some examples of kind of the specific actions we're looking for, because again, the playbook is really a menu of options. And so if you can get as specific as possible, like if you could boil it down to one sentence, what would it be? What could we do? That's really what we're kind of asking here. And so at the organizational level, organizations plant trees. So planting appropriate trees at facilities and sites. This could be a business. It could be the municipal operations of a local government. It could be a university. At the community scale, developing a forest management plan, planting trees in right-of-ways, providing incentives to private landowners to plant or maintain trees. So lots of different ways of doing this. At the regional scale, conducting a regional tree analysis or canopy analysis, including an analysis of social equity implications. This was, already previewed in our previous discussion. Would love to hear more about that. I think there was a commenter. I think Bill Tippett's mentioned a GIS-based regional canopy assessment. Love to hear more about that in the discussion. So if you can give us more or details on that or a link to that, that would be great. And other regional activities could include conducting an analysis, a broad analysis to determine kind of the potential for natural and working lands in our region to remove and store carbon. So again, just some examples. Love to hear more of your thoughts. And with that, again, I'll turn it back to Mortiza.
Thank you very much, Scott, on this overview of carbon removal. And we want your feedback on this. Before we get to the questions, and whilst Rebecca is putting on the mural, I just wanted to mention a couple of state bills. Scott mentioned the executive order N8220, which is a 30-30 goal of establishing 30% of California's land and coastal waters by 2030 as part of this initiative of conserving land for biodiversity and climate goals. Assembly Bill 2278 passed a couple of weeks ago that implements that executive order. In addition, Assembly Bill 2251 will provide a statewide strategic plan for urban forestry. And Rebecca, are you putting up the mural for the discussion? This mural, as I mentioned before, will capture some of the comments that we're receiving.
Yes,
Okay,
sorry, some technical difficulties. One moment.
Okay, so it's okay. Whilst you're putting up the mural, I'll go over some of the comments on the chat. I'll just start with Madison. I'm sorry if I missed all the comments, but Madison says, I'll go over this very quickly while you're doing that, so we kind of track time. Okay. So I'll start with John. John says urban forestry is very important. Shade and cooling are big parts. Research also shows that green spaces are soothing. Cody Harrison says, are we deprioritizing many factors that could do both, provide local mitigation in contrast to GHG reduction, which do not provide local mitigation adaptation benefits because they don't rank as highly in terms of greenhouse gas emissions. Yes, Cody, that's kind of important. In terms of how do we get the continuum right and balance, particularly when we think of investing in repeated climate emergencies in terms of our resiliency towards them. Addison Breeze says when encouraging tree planting strategies, however, it's important to consider native plants and ecosystems. Planting many trees are not drought tolerant and do not support local plant, animal, and insect life, not make as much of a collective impact as restored habitat, including rich biodiversity. Elise, I'll be coming to you very shortly with a question on what is biodiversity and why does it matter to us. Joel Kramer mentions Pooja Batra, who's on this call, has paved the way for estimating the sequestration potential in working lands here at the RCD, which I believe is a regional conservation district. We're completing a study in a partnership based on San Diego Association of Governments methods to refine that estimate. Looking forward to sharing the results. And of course, Pooja Batra, you're welcome to come on the audio and share with us as well. Okay, finally, just a couple more. Mary, I see your hand is raised, so I think I'll stop here and wait and go over to the audio channel. Go ahead, Mary. Apologies if that was technical error. I see Joe's hands raised. Joe, you want to go next?
Yes, thank you, Murtaza. I'd like to propose that we close both Montgomery Field and Brown Field. We don't need wealthy people's, toy boxes or whatever. Replace those two wonderful pieces of land with an urban forest. It will move us toward 30 by 30. It will increase our local food availability. It will reduce emissions, sequester carbon, and take some of the carbon emitting planes out of the air in our environment. Thank you.
My apologies, I went too fast on the interpreter. For reading out the chat, I'll slow down next time. Also, it kind of is helpful for the translator as well if folks are able to articulate on the audio. I will okay, I have Anthony next.
I thank you for conducting this exercise. I think it's really valuable, and I like the way everybody is going about it and ideas are taken into consideration. I just want to propose that the kind of overall design is sort of focused on like behavior change and these specific actions, and even like this, what's on the screen now, what one organization can do, what a community can do, etc. When fundamentally the whole bottleneck of all action is economic. And so I think San Diego's economy is some $200 or $210 billion. So at any point, that economy could bear, using like 1% of the economy to generate $200 million a year towards, or I think $2 billion, dollars a year towards solutions. A different example related specifically to this track would be in relation to like the restaurant industry and the tourism industry. So an optional 1% fee, if it was an opt-out on those industries, would generate something like $190 million a year that could transformatively scale carbon sequestration on working lands. And so I think that what I'm proposing specifically as an idea is a CCA style program. similar to community choice aggregation for renewable energy, but adapted for carbon sequestration on working lands. We already have ordinances ready for anybody who's ready to adopt and implement such programs. And we're sort of creating political will and participation along the way to de-risk that politically.
Thank you, Anthony. And perhaps it's could feed into the urban forest management plan.
Absolutely.
Okay.
So our plan is basically just generate millions of dollars or hundreds of millions of dollars and then start using it for solutions and sort of leave it to the community and the decision makers which solutions are the best and what proportion of natural versus energy and transportation.
Thank you, Anthony. And then also to think a little bit about regional restoration. Like we do conservation land, we can think of restoration as additionally having carbon benefits. Okay, so I see there's a lot going on in the chat as well. Joe, I'll come to you, but before I do that, I wanted to touch on a topic that oftentimes folks talk about biodiversity and the significance of biodiversity in this, particularly in San Diego. And I want to bring up Ed Wilson's book, Half Earth, in the context of how do we, when we have a planetary crisis with almost 1 million species that the intergovernmental panel that looks into this has thought is threatened. How do we address that kind of a extinction of species with a solution that says we need to aspire to making this kind of a connected ecosystem for a planet that preserves some for nature. So therefore, Elise, if you can come on and explain what is biodiversity and why is it important for San Diego?
Yeah, so biodiversity is a term that just kind of captures the breadth and the depth of the number of species that are in an area. So San Diego County is one of the most biodiverse counties in the entire country, in large part because we have such a high diversity of habitats, ranging from coastal systems to desert systems, from low-lying shrub systems to alpine forests, or not quite alpine, but montane forest systems. So we have an abundance of plant species and insect species, but also importantly, we are in the Pacific Flyway. So we have numerous species that fly through the county, traveling north and south during their migrations. So biodiversity in the San Diego region is exceptional, and we are considered a biodiversity hotspot, meaning that many of these species are threatened either by human-caused threats to extinction or climate change caused threats to extinction. So we have both abundant and unique set of species in this area and a unique set of threats to those species. So biodiversity is something that is important to consider in and of itself, and there are numerous ways in which protecting and enhancing biodiversity can also have very important climate benefits and mitigation benefits against the effects of climate change.
Thank you so much, Elise. I'll just briefly go over the chat, Kyle, and then I'll come to you on the audio. So Mary Balderrama expresses an unpopular opinion. Nothing is unpopular, it's fact-based. No more palm trees, water-intensive, limited shade, limited carbon sequestration. Mary Lysagang says, and only one species of palm trees actually native to the state of California. Joel says, oh, sorry, I should slow down here for the interpreter. Joel says, oh, you need to sign up. Thank you for joining us. Pooja Batra. Okay, I'll read this a little bit slowly. It's a very lengthy post, but I think it's got a lot of facts here. So let me take a minute to read it. So Pooja said, with both rural and urban lands, protecting existing trees, which both hold carbon as well as provide future sequestration, must be done by addressing the barriers. Why do they get removed or die in the first place? For urban trees, new developments must have enforced regulations for developers on removing large trees and or replanting, maintaining new trees as compensation. For farms, crop swap is longer term transition that needs to start happening now. And also at the same time, for the trees in the ground right now, we need to address rising water costs and rising water demands that are due to rising temperatures. Okay, all right. Now with that, I'll turn it over to you. Thanks, Kyle, for waiting.
Yeah, thank you. I wanted to mention a couple of things as it relates to the slide that was shown that sort of kicked off this discussion around the CARB scoping plan and how there's a lot of really troubling things that have arisen from carbon capture at the statewide scale that I just wanted to share in this space. A lot of the initiatives and the momentum behind carbon capture has been coming from energy and oil companies. And it's really because they see carbon capture technologies as a way to keep fossil fuel industry functioning for the coming decades. So while the term carbon capture and carbon removal is a very big umbrella term, there's good carbon capture technologies we have. The best example is a tree. And then there's bad examples which have the real threat of extending the life of fossil fuel infrastructure like oil refineries. So environmental justice communities across the state are deeply concerned about carbon capture technologies having the potential to continue to harm environmental justice communities that have already been harmed by the fossil fuel industry. So while we don't have any refineries in San Diego, I just wanted to give that context for the statewide environmental justice movement that's working to prevent that from happening. And then in terms of carbon capture, I think a lot of this conversation's been around healthy soils and wetlands and natural systems. And I really emphasize that that is where we need to focus and to really be wary of these schemes for a magical technology, a magic bullet solution that will enable us to continue to use fossil fuels because we're going to have technology that removes the carbon impacts from that. So just really appreciate that a lot of the conversations at this level have been focusing in on the natural solutions. And to Cody's point in the chat, that mentioning the IPCC reports, there's sort of a traditional number distribution I've seen where it's 90% and 10%, where we need to decarbonize 90% at least of our whole system in the immediate short term, and that remaining 10% is what we can rely on carbon removal for. So thanks.
Thank you so much, Kyle, for that comment and distinguishing some of the terminology, particularly carbon capture and storage, CCS, is technology driven, usually at the polluting source where carbon is then either through chemical process or treatment stored. And that is, like you mentioned, Kyle, a lot of the times relate to, say, oil refineries, which we don't have that many here. So in terms of this this particular topic of discussion here, we use the term carbon removal and storage, and want to kind of like I really appreciate how you said about something about natural climate solutions. And whilst we were exploring the title of this, I think Elise, who was the lead author of this, has kind of some insights to share, because oftentimes we forget that nature itself has a way of sustaining and balancing the cycle in nature. So if you want, Elise, you can kind of tell us a little bit, respond to Kyle's comment on natural climate solutions and how that perspective in terms of the role of natural climate solutions and carbon in the carbon cycle.
Sure. Yeah, I really appreciate that 90-10 ratio breakdown, because that's very much what the literature shows again and again. You know, natural climate solutions are wonderful and are often quite inexpensive ways to reduce the amount of carbon in the atmosphere, but they can only do so much. We can only plant so many trees across the entire planet. And even if we covered, you know, the whole planet in trees, if we keep emitting, then we're still going to be stuck in the same situation. So reducing at a very large level is critical. And the natural climate solutions are important for kind of giving that last little bit, but they will never, they're never going to be able to offset how much we're emitting now and how much we've emitted historically. So I think, you know, that's a very critical point to bring up.
Thank you. With that, I don't see any hands raised up. There's a bunch of chat. I'll try to summarize a lot of it. So also just keep in mind that if there's any topics we've not covered today, we will have an open discussion so that we can take your ideas, because these were just the topics that we wanted input on, and there might be gaps in what our knowledge base is. So please feel free to either tell us now, put it in the chat, or email us, or put it in the Engage platform, any way that you feel. Of course, we're welcome to come present to you, talk to you, or call us. We will love to discuss with you your ideas and solutions. So let me quickly go over the chat whilst okay, so I'll start with Addison. I think this discussion is mainly about carbon capture. It's seen as a solution to draw down emissions that are already in the atmosphere. Urgency needs to be given to radical systems change to disrupt our reliance on fossil fuels and single-use plastic. Cody Harrison says that he does not think it is very useful, given that 99% of captured carbon dioxide is used for enhanced oil recovery. Addison says that carbon capture is an important part of multi-pronged intersectional climate solutions, but the danger in seeing it as a scapegoat in it to reduce emissions urgently. Pooja Batra says that soil can be a net emitter of greenhouse gas emissions under conditions of drought. So unless we focus on soil health, we are exacerbating a runaway cycle of soil degradation and climate change. Addison says soil health is human health. Anthony has given us a primer on soil carbon, I think. Thank you so much. We're gonna save it and use that as a resource. Carl says that Carl Eldinger says that if you don't explicitly call out CCS, such as carbon capture and storage, and CCUS, I'm not sure what that is, explicitly as a fall solution, then this implementation guide will leave room for individual cities to miss that the community has asked for a region to not use it locally or remotely. And Kyle agrees with Carl, and Cody does too. Anthony has a counterpoint on the 90-10. Food and farming is viewed as about 48% of the solution by Project Drawdown and over 100% of the solution by Rodale. Rodell scenario is unrealistic extrapolation, but nonetheless speaks to the ultimate potential. If you want, Anthony, you can come on the audio, but I see your hand is down. Okay, so with that, I want to give just a brief pause to see if any other questions on this topic. A topic that has okay, as we are moving on to the open discussion session, we'll keep Rebecca will keep this mural up and move over to the bike rack. And in order to kind of think about anything else you might have missed, one of the topics that came up was about sprawl. I think Madison brought it up right from the beginning. A couple of people brought it up, and just in terms of terminology, and I know that especially coming from the UCSD study, the technical report, there was discussion about preventing land use change, and let me kind of put a kind of a little bit of emphasis on the question and ask Elise first to start this off. This is the discussion now on topics we've not covered. So does preventing land use change just mean stopping all development? And that question, Elise, as you're the author, I wanted to start with you.
Yeah, so the idea of preventing land use change doesn't mean halting everything in exactly the way it is right now, because that's simply unrealistic. We have a housing shortage, we have a housing affordability crisis, and simply put, we will need to continue to build. It's more a discussion of how can we minimize the impact to natural and working lands while maximizing the benefits to residents in the San Diego region. How can we combine affordability with protecting natural and working lands, and how can we, provide those green spaces to the residents who already live here? So there are a lot of discussions and planning that need to go into that, but the two are not mutually exclusive. We can do a lot to protect natural and working lands and to provide quality housing for the region.
Thank you. Elise, and I just want to point out the relationship to biodiversity in the intergovernmental report that talked about almost a quarter of the species of plant and animal species that are threatened, in large part with almost 3/4 of land surface being significantly altered besides climate change. So there's a kind of relationship in terms of how land and nature interact with each other. So this is like from the global perspective, not from a land use planning zoning perspective. Okay, all right. So with that, I want to wait for a minute to hear if anybody wants to come over audio. In the meantime, I'll read the chat. Addison says building soil health also significantly decreases soil erosion and increases water retention. Both are critical for our region. Yeah, water is a significant issue. Mary Balderrama says matching up dense housing and transportation land use with an emphasis on transit. Yes, the interconnected systems here between transportation, land use, energy use, and natural climate solutions. So it's almost like nature's climate cycle in terms of how we respond to it as humans in an urban setting. Okay, I don't see anybody else having their hand raised on topics we've not covered. Looks like this was quite very engaging discussion with the two topics we had up there. Okay, one last call before I wrap up. Okay, so I will conclude with reminding us about the California Climate Crisis Act, which will be the law on the 1st of January 2023. It will establish a clear, legally binding, and achievable goal for California to achieve statewide carbon neutrality as soon as possible and no later than 2045, and will establish an 85% emissions target as part of that goal. We all need to work together to achieve that goal, and San Diego can be a leader in the state of California. So with that, I will turn it back to Michael to wrap up.
Thanks, Myrna. Thanks, everyone, for joining us this afternoon. It was a great conversation. We really appreciate the specifics that were provided today and the literature that was added in the chats. We'll be sure to follow up. We will be posting everything, including the recording, on our special topic working group portal. So please check back for additional materials there. Also, if you think of any additional actions or activities or programs that you want to share with us, please use the engagement site or share ideas with us directly through email. Just a few reminders, we will be the next meeting for the Land Use and Natural Climate Solutions will be on November 3rd. So please make sure you're registered for that to attend. And then I did want to share that our next working group, special topic working group, will be Thursday, October 20th, and those schedules are online. So there's a little bit of a break so staff can take a look at the material and the comments and the suggestions, recommendations that were provided, and that we can gather those thoughts and then engage with you in this next coming round starting October 20th with electricity. So if you're interested in those topics, well, please register on the homepage. And again, please feel free to email, post questions on the engagement site. We really hope that people engage there. And again, thank you for taking your time this afternoon and providing your suggestions and comments and concerns. And please know that we're available if you'd like us to engage and present to you, or we want to be sure to make sure that we're answering your comments and questions. So thanks so much, everyone. Again, please, we hope to hear from you soon. And thank you for joining us, and we wish you a great afternoon. Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you.